May of 2020, and we all know what that means. We are in the midst of our COVID-19 pandemic. All of us are sheltering at home, and we're here to talk today with Holly Connell, the mother of Hayleigh, who is the who maybe you'll tell us about. But the book is The Girl Next Door Meets Cancer. I'm really, really keen to talk about this book today. It certainly hits me close to home in my own situation, and it certainly, even before I was in that situation, it really got to me. So this is a story where Hayleigh, who's a young woman with a very rare gynecological cancer, who did die of her illness, but it's her blog and writings up to the point of her death, which in some ways it was, as a reader, that it's coming, but she as the writer does not know that it's coming. And so I think that really added to the poignancy of the story. So today we have Hayleigh's mother is here. And Holly, I wanted to ask you about your decision to publish Hayleigh's work. Tell us about how that all came about.
Well, she started writing the book almost immediately after she had they identified there was something in her pelvis. It was large. So she basically started writing that night, not knowing exactly what it was at that point in time. And afterwards, they decided they were going to remove it. And then we got the diagnosis of her diagnoses of the multiple types of cancer that she had in that one ovary. And she had started writing it. And her and I used to go walking every morning at 8 o'clock. We had a ritual. 8 o'clock was our time to go and walk and talk. And on one of the walks, she asked me, she said, "Mom," she goes, "I've been approached by a friend who is a physician, and he tells me that I need to publish the blog in a book form. He felt that there was good teaching material in there, especially for physicians, oncologists, nursing oncologists, anybody who had to deliver that diagnosis, because it was very raw and very, this is what I was told, this is how I reacted." And he saw great value in that. And I said to her, I said, "Well, Hayleigh, the thing is, when you get better, we're going to publish it." And of course, we know now that that didn't happen. So it was on her bucket list. I fulfilled her bucket list, which is another reason it's published under Hayleigh Noel O'Brien. And that was also part of her bucket list. She wanted to be Mrs. O'Brien, who was her fiance. And that's a whole other backstory. But yeah, that's how it ended up being published. I was fulfilling her bucket list.
And was getting it published a challenge? Was it a self-published book, or how did you go about the actual publication?
Well, I approached Friesen Press, who are the people that have published it, and I sent them the manuscript, and I said, "Look, I don't even know if this is something that you guys want to deal with. I'm not sure if it's, do you think it's good enough to publish?" Anybody who read the blog said, "Wow, yeah, this is publishable." They came back to me within an hour and a half, the girl that I had approached, and she said, "We want this. We absolutely want this." So I, through them, did all I had to do all the typing. And there are a couple of typos in there that I missed. So, but that's with anything. And I think if we ever republished it, I would go in and correct them. But for the most part, it's exactly Hayleigh's words, how she wrote them, other than my one or two typos. So yeah, it was a job in and of itself, and it probably took about 18 months.
What was it like for you as her mother to bring her words to light like that? I would imagine it would have been very emotionally draining to
It
revisit.
it was extremely emotionally draining. I have to say I miss my girl more than anybody will ever know. But she lives through those words. It would be like if I had a video of her, which I have a couple, she lives for me through those bodies of work. And she was a very good writer,
Yes, I was
very good
impressed with
writer. Yeah.
how composed she was as she was
Yeah.
facing really tough news and tough situations. And
But she was a fighter too, and she was very pragmatic in her approach to everything. So, this was what it was. And my dad got through it because he had a cancer when she was a little girl. And now I've got it. She never knew that her dad had the secondary cancer, or that I think she knew her sister. Yeah, she did know her sister was diagnosed towards the end of her life. So it was a very painful but a very cathartic experience
It's funny,
as well.
you say cathartic. That's exactly what I was going to ask you, actually. Was there an aspect of this that was cathartic? And would you talk about it a little?
You know, I guess over the last almost 3 years, I've developed a different sense of spirituality, and I can hear Hayleigh. I can hear Hayleigh speaking all those words. Um, I think anybody who reads it who knew her can hear her speaking them. And so in that sense, you know it it was healing, but it was also very painful. And like I say, I've developed a different sense of spirituality through dealing with it and through dealing with her passing.
what I responded to it emotionally, probably more than any of the other books we've ever done. And Pat and I have done quite a number of books here. Again, it's a book club. And part of it is because I thought, for once, this is a book that tells the truth about culture. Because and I wrote a review for the book. You are the only book I've reviewed for on Amazon for Cancer Book Club.
That's interesting. I'll have to go in. I couldn't find it.
Review for. But I wrote it, and as I said in that review, I said the difference between this book and all the other books is that this, not only is it a real, true book, but it explodes that myth that people survive cancers because they're somehow amazing and great and wise and good and strong and blessed by God, or they have this, that, the other thing, that it just, those people who survive cancer are lucky. They were caught early, they got the best medicines, whatever, or they were facing the illnesses that weren't completely unstoppable like hers was. And so, in a way, I felt like it showed all those sort of arrogant writers who meet a lot of writers, and a lot of them are saying, I did it because I'm great. It wasn't because you were great, because Hayleigh was great too.
Hayleigh was great too.
Fighter, every bit as spiritual, every bit as in love with life and her purpose in life for the people around her.
You know what's interesting? What's really interesting, Robin, is that her dad, of course, read it as she was writing it. He would read it every time it was posted. He'd go on and he'd read it. And he was a cancer survivor. And he had, as he was told when he was diagnosed the first time, you picked the right cancer. That was the doctor's, the urologist's words to him was, if you had picked any other cancer, 5 years into it, you'd be gone. And he was, I think, at 23 or 24 years cancer free when Hayleigh was diagnosed. And he read it and he said, this is it. This is exactly what I couldn't say. This is exactly how I felt. And Hayleigh for some reason was able to pull that out and was able to write about it and was able to share it. And I had a friend of mine who actually, she texted me and she said, I need 5 copies right now. And I said, for what? Well, why 5 copies? Because people were buying them 5, 10, whatever. And she said, my sister was just diagnosed with cancer and she needs to read this. She needs to absolutely read it. And she sent me a thank you back and she said it was emotionally draining to read, but it was very helpful.
I think we can learn so much through the experiences of others. And one of the things you mentioned that really intrigues me is the idea that this could be used for educational purposes as well. And I think that is so important because I think so often physicians are very well-meaning, but they don't have that emotional insight into what the reality really is.
Well, and the physician that had encouraged her to publish, he was interesting because he said to us, he said, he says, a lot of times we go through med school and we're taught how to, treat illness through a book, but not through a person. And, we're just so in that box with the disease and with what we've learned out of the books and what we've learned, practical. Yet we don't stop and take the time to say to the person we're treating, so how did this affect you? And that was one of the reasons he wanted it published as well. Like he said, there's a lot of young doctors out there who are just so into what they're doing that they don't take that time. And he said, Hayleigh provides that. It's like, hey, you guys told me this. This is what I heard. And this is how I responded. And I think that's an important thing for them all to learn.
And I think another dimension that she brings to it is that hers was a young adult cancer. So many oncologists are dealing with people in their 60s and 70s. Here's a young woman with her whole life ahead of her.
Yep.
The feelings one would have when you're thinking about, okay, there goes my ovaries, there goes my fertility, there goes my, what does that mean for my future?
Yeah. Well, yeah, she, like I say, she approached it very pragmatically, and she even said to her fiance, she sat him down and she said, look, this is not good. This might not turn out very well. I don't know what the future holds, but if you want out, here's your chance. She goes, I will be sad, but here's your chance. And he turned around and, it was more like in for a penny, in for a pound. I'm not going anywhere. I'm with you on this. And, he's part of our family. He's just a terrific guy. He's now finally starting to move on with his life, which, we encourage. You can't live in the past. And Hayleigh is not coming back. And we all know that. I mean, in my heart, I wish she could, but no. So, we bonded together. All of us were together through this. It was a real, and interestingly enough, when my husband was diagnosed first with cancer, Hayleigh was the one person who, she could go in with him into the cancer clinic. She would help the nurses hook up the IVs, like not the IVs, but the normal saline bags and that. She was like 8 years old at that time, if not younger. And I think in a sense, it brought our family closer together. Her sister, unfortunately, couldn't stand needles or watching needles being inserted and would actually faint. So we just kind of, you go play basketball or something. And, but Hayleigh was there and, asking a ton of questions. She always had a keen mind like that. And she actually said at one point when she graduated, because she was a social worker by trade, when she graduated from university, she said, you know what my ideal dream job would be? And this is like almost, it was bizarre. She said, I'd like to work on the cancer ward. I'd like to be an oncological social worker.
There you go.
When we published the book, one of her asks was that we send all of the money that we made off the book after expenses and send it to Ovarian Cancer Canada and to the local hospice. So I've been doing that along. We you know, it's a really complex sort of living out of her wishes, because we've got so many things on the go, and I've actually had to say no to a couple of things. The cancer walks and that I can't do it. I just, you know,
One of us can now. Relay for Life is now virtual. I signed up for virtual Relay for Life.
that would be much easier to do.
A question.
Yeah.
A question. With everything you've been through, what would you pass along to other mothers facing a similar circumstance?
Be prepared. Be prepared for a lot of pain. Be prepared for loss. But I also think, you know, it's funny because people get really uncomfortable, especially after someone passes. They don't want to talk. They don't want you to have to talk. They don't want to see you cry. And I encourage anybody that, you know, suffers that kind of a loss to keep them alive. Say their name. You know, go out and do something like this. If they've written stuff, find a way. I met another mom here in Kamloops whose daughter had passed away from, I believe it, I don't think it was ovarian cancer, but it was gynecological in nature. They did a video and they actually won an award through TELUS for this video. And she emailed me and she said, "Can I get a copy of your book?" And I didn't know at the time who this mom was or what her backstory was. And we both agreed when we met that the one thing you want to do is to keep your child alive and to keep them alive in your mind and to share their story, and to, especially if they've got one like Hayleigh's or one like her daughter's, where somebody can learn from it and they can explain. You know?
That's important. It sort of fulfills that social worker side of her, wanting to kind of give comfort and counsel to other people.
Yep.
It's posthumous, but she does do that. She does provide a kind of map for the kind of courage it takes for a young person to face a terminal diagnosis. And and also in the book we read her sort of evolving or understanding, coming to an understanding that her illness is a terminal one. So she starts off like all of us do. Oh, it's gonna, I'll get the treatment. I'll do. It's, and then she goes through this hard chemo, and she describes the hard treatments.
Yeah.
And then she gets well again. She's in remission. She's traveling. And then
she's going to PEI. Gets engaged. She's, actively talking about someday having a family if she can.
So there was all that hopefulness, and then news of recurrence, and then her kind of coming to terms with what that means. And
though, one of the things I have to say, I believe she knew she was going to pass when she did. I honestly have to say that looking back on it, there were some very strange premonitions and just things that she did that led me to believe afterwards that, you know what, she knew. She knew.
Adds to the spiritual dimension of.
Oh, well, yeah, exactly.
I remember part of the book where she's describing going into the hospice, and she's in the car driving to the hospice. She says, "Boy, am I ever lucky. I'm only in the hospice, going to be in the hospice for a little bit. I'll get to come out." A lot of people who go into hospice will not get to come out, but she didn't get to come out because she died of I guess it was a blood clot within a little while.
Yeah. Well, she was walking the dog, who is now 16 years old and limps along behind us, and he is, he looks for her every day. He comes in the house because he lives next door with Hayleigh's fiance, So he comes over here and he keeps us company and we keep him company. Well, his dad's at work, and he comes in and he goes to certain rooms and he looks around, and it's like he doesn't know what he's looking for, but he's looking for something. And I honestly think it's her.
Yeah, I'm very touched by that.
Yeah.
You're
Well,
gonna have to take over for a minute while I work.
One of the things
I'm
that you
sorry.
mentioned that is such a hard part of cancer for so many of us is facing recurrence. Some people are fortunate enough not to go through treatment and be well, but recurrence is really, really tough. I mean, I can't imagine how you had to feel when you heard that news.
Well, especially when the spec, I think it was a spec scan she had originally that said, okay, we can't see anything. It looks like it's all taken care of. Go on and live your life and come back in, I don't know, X number of months and we'll redo it. And of course, then you get smacked in the head and yeah, it's back. And even with like her dad, who was 23 years in remission, and then all of a sudden, boom, and it's this other weird cancer. One of the things that we did as a family, not me, because I'm the mom, but because their dad had cancer and his parents both had cancer, his grandparents had cancer. So there was a link. Not all were, more were endocrine type cancers. His dad had a brain cancer. Rick had a testicular cancer initially. Her sister had thyroid cancer. So we approached the BC Cancer Agency and said, one of the things that Hayleigh wanted done was she wanted genetic testing. And before she was part of a program, and she covers it in the book, through the BC Cancer Agency, where they were trying to find kind of weird, obscure cures for cancer. Like there was a woman who had, I think it was a lung cancer, and they ended up putting her on metformin, which is for diabetes, but it cured her cancer. So the hope was that they would find something that would go in and would kill off the endocrine cancer, the neuroendocrine cancer, and whatever the other one, her ovarian cancer, anyhow. But it came back, there was nothing conclusive about the testing that they did. And they tested my husband, they tested Hayleigh, they had genetic material from my grandson. Stephanie, our oldest daughter in Alberta, they didn't want to be a part of it. She asked them if they would do the blood work and send it to BC Cancer Agency, and they said at the time, no, because you're cured.
I suspect that in 50 years from now, if there is a civilization 50 years from now, they will know there will be genetic markers for the kinds of things. It's just they just don't have the science, so they don't know what they're looking at. They don't know what to look for. There is nothing genetically unique about your family. It's just they don't have the scientific language to describe that yet.
The doctor that we have been dealing with at the genetic program in Vancouver, she actually said to us, we're not getting rid of any of this. We are going to keep it. We are going to keep looking at it. We are going to keep testing it. And we are hoping at some point to find something so that we have an answer for you, which I really am appreciative of. And I think Hayleigh would be really pleased to hear that as well.
There is so much wisdom behind these experiences and these stories that we all tell. And they need to be held on to, and they need to be shared, because somewhere in there is that piece of wisdom that somebody needs to make a difference. And it may be another person with cancer. It may at some point in the future be a researcher looking at things, and where they start lining up different commonalities of stories. And I think it's really important to capture all these things for all of us.
Absolutely. And I think she would be pleased to know that as well, that it was being done, because she was very much, Hayleigh was the person who, there's a blood drive in town, I'm going to go give blood. Well, they brought up the one match. She had signed up to be a donor for one match. And unfortunately, just before she was supposed to go in and have the testing done, she was diagnosed. So that, that just rendered her not acceptable. But and that's the other thing we've done, is we've kept up with things like the blood donor drive. So she has, her name is attached to a team, and we've pledged 100 donations a year through her friends and family. And we've pretty much met those markers every time. So and we do a ball tournament for her. So, and we use the book. We bring the book to the ball tournaments, and there's lots of people who have never read it or don't know why they're at a ball tournament for a girl named Hayleigh Connell or Hayleigh O'Brien. And they read the book and they come back and they go, oh my God, I need a few more copies because I need to send these to people. So it's not only people who have cancer, who have been diagnosed with cancer, but it's people who are touched. And I think I can't think of one person that I know who has not been touched by cancer in one way, shape, or form. We all know somebody, we all have somebody. Unfortunately, I have 3 out of 4 people in my house that had it. I live on a street where every single house on the end of our cul-de-sac has had some form of cancer, which is really scary.
Wonder about an environmental factor there too as well, right?
I keep thinking everything's been so chaotic, and every time I go to do it, something else comes up. I get a radon kit. And,
that is a very good thought. Radon is they call it the silent killer for good reason.
Yeah. Well, and I even was thinking the other day, several years back, Hayleigh and her dad took a trip to Egypt. And I had no desire. I love Egyptology. I think it's fascinating, but it's hot there and I don't do well in heat. And I thought, you know what? That'll give them a chance to go, because Hayleigh and I did other trips together. And I was watching something the other day and they were talking about the curse of, going down into the things. And I'm thinking, oh my God, they both went down into some of these pyramids. I hope they didn't inhale something that, started this. So, you really grasp at stuff.
Exactly. You and like all people who with cancer or their loved ones could it have been the apple I ate back in 1970? Could it have been that sunny day I didn't wear enough sunscreen? Was it the time I walked past that smoker? Like it could be, people told you can torment yourself for a long, long time.
And I don't think we'll ever know.
Of bad luck that causes these.
Yeah, it was like with Hayleigh, it was very, very interesting, because I can remember sitting in our doctor's office, and he's got this TV that it shows like PSAs and that on it, and we're sitting there. We just found this guy as our doctor because our doctor had retired, and they were playing this thing, and it was a reference to neuroendocrine cancer, and the fact that when you hear horses' hooves, it's okay, but if you don't hear it, then it's probably a zebra. And the zebra print is actually what the neuroendocrine cancer, that's their ribbon colors, is zebra print. And so it was sort of like this precursor to what was going to go on in it. And then afterwards, I said to her, don't you find that really weird that you ended up with that cancer? And here we are months before that watching this video in the doctor's office where they reference it. And she goes, I know, isn't that bizarre? So.
Yeah, there's all kinds of patterns out there and all kinds of things we wonder about in retrospect. But I guess what I wanted to emphasize about we're sort of coming to the close of our interview here. But what I want to emphasize as myself as a reader, myself having recently received a terminal diagnosis myself, that that I knew was coming. I was told you are going to recur, and it just happens to happen right in the middle of COVID-19, which is super important.
Yeah.
But I guess I was impressed by her courage. I was a little bit, frankly, sounds strange to you, but I was a little bit jealous that she was able to die quickly and painlessly, that she didn't have to suffer very much. And that she died doing what she loved, which is being outside with her dog. So you know, and I'm glad that she didn't have to have a lot of dread and anticipation of a hard
Yeah.
death.
Well, it was, yeah. And you know, to the way that all came down, and like I say, I think she knew was because she sent Keith, her fiance, shopping. She sent me home, and she had sent me shopping earlier to get her like a tunic or a blouse that she could wear after, because she was getting married on December 25th. So I brought that back, and Hayleigh was typical. It was typical of her to say, just take it home and I'll try it on when I get there. And the doctor had come in the morning and said, oh, you can go home. You can go home today if you want. She goes, nah, I'm going to spend one more day. And I'm like, okay. You know, after the fact, it's like, that wasn't Hayleigh, because Hayleigh would have been packed and ready to go under any other circumstance. And then, like I say, she sent Keith out, and then she decided to take Liam out for a walk out of the building by herself. And that's when all, you know, everything hit the fan, and we got the phone call that something bad had happened. And I'm like, well, what could have happened? She was okay when I left there, you know, an hour ago. And apparently Liam, she dropped the leash. He sat right by her head and kept trying to wake her up, kept scratching at her head. And Keith was the one who found her out in the parking lot.
Wow. So
Yeah.
that's not, that part is not.
You know, and I often wondered, you know, I didn't include a prologue in it, like.
No, you made a cat. There was enough. I felt it was just enough of an outline for the reader to understand that something serious was going to happen to this young lady, and that it's one of the, it was painful as we, the reader, knows what's coming. The writer, does not know what's coming, and I felt that the poignancy of that was really, really powerful, and that's why I think it was one of the most valuable of the cancer books we have read.
Do you have a copy? Do you have a copy of the book at all that you can show us?
Yes, I do. You know what's interesting? I always thought it was kind of written in the same vein as Go Ask Alice. I don't know if you ever read that.
Yes, of course.
So there's the book.
The Girl Next Door Meets Cancer, and it is a book for everybody to consider picking up and reading. It is just an excellent book, and I know everybody with cancer will relate to it, and everybody who's been touched by cancer will relate to it as well.
There is a website that you can order directly from any one of the book vendors that's carrying it, and pretty much all of them are. And it's https://thegirlnextdoormeetscancer.com. And they have the links. We've put the links in. Now I have to admit,
on Twitter as well, under that title.
Yep. Or just put into your search The Girl Next Door Meets Cancer, and it'll take you right to it. I started writing a blog. I could not keep going. I have had to put it down, and I fully intend to go back and to write some more. I just need to find it within myself what I want to say.
Well, in the meantime, www.thegirlnextdoormeetscancer.com. Everyone check it out if you would. Robin, do we have anything scheduled? Or we're going into summer recess, aren't we?
Well, I have my own chemotherapy and treatments starting up sometime next month. There is one book I really would like to review. I have to touch base with the author to make sure that he would be okay with joining us. That would be Reverend David McGinley wrote a book called Beyond Survival. So that's more of a spiritual side of things, and that's of interest to many. So I'll see if he will join us maybe one more time, and then we'll have our summer break. That's my ambition. So we'll take it from there.
We will make it so. Holly, thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate it.
Lovely to see your face. Your daughter describes you so lovingly.
Yeah, the mama bear.
Take care.